episode of the podcast is brought to you by LeafWell.
Hello, Cannabinoid Connect listeners. Have you ever thought about getting a medical card? The process can be intimidating and hard to navigate. That's why I've partnered with LeafWell, the easiest and most affordable way to get a medical card in Texas and 32 other states in the U.S. LeafWell seamlessly connects you to a network of doctors that will help you get certified online in minutes. LeafWell is run by data scientists, cannabis specialists, and patient advocates that are passionate about increasing access and education around medical cannabis. LeafWell's patient support team is also there to support you throughout your entire journey using medical cannabis. As I've mentioned, I've partnered with LeafWell to provide all my listeners with a discount to become certified for medical cannabis. Simply go to their website at leafwell.com and use the promo code CCTX to receive $15 off the price of getting a medical card. LeafWell only charges you if you get approved, so what do you have to lose? Visit their website at leafwell.com today and use the promo code CCTX to get certified for medical cannabis. Risk-free. Hello, Dawn. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. I thank you for making time for me. I know that you're currently working, right? I mean, you said your staff was at lunch at this time.
Yeah, we have it's like that weird we call it the witching hour here in the office. A lot of our staff, because there's a switch between the Eastern, Central, and Pacific time zones. So a lot of the staff is pretty much making their way into lunch and or breaks. So this is where usually we have a dead time. Our phones don't ring very often, but when they do, they start ringing.
Got you. Well, I mean, I would imagine, the phones are ringing. Y'all are busy being the first and longest standing seed to sale software system, an ERP system, to be specific. So really looking forward to talking to you more about Proteus 420 or Proteus Business Solutions, Inc., and your role as CMO and co-founder of the company, Dawn. But before we do that, I mean, I noticed that you were recently at MJ BizCon. How was that experience?
Oh my gosh. We've been going for years, but we primarily walked the floor. Usually myself and David, who's my husband and business partner. And we usually would walk the floor because a lot of times it's our clients, our customers are there. So we went to go support our customers. And a lot of people were like, you really should put up a booth. You should be there. So we kind of just said, all right, fine, we'll do it. We did a whole new booth design, and boy, that was it. It was a game changer, really. It was a lot of people we heard of you. We just didn't know exactly what you did. Or my gosh, we didn't realize how long you guys have been in the game. We heard the name, but again, it was more of we always called ourselves the quiet giant.
Well, and I'm always curious because like you said, it was a game changer, and I would imagine from a networking standpoint, right? Because you got a concentrated group of industry professionals who are there to network and talk to each other and grow their businesses, right? And so in that aspect, but like, did you also see it as a game changer in terms of sales and conversions?
Yes, we have. This year was a really big year for us in the trade show circuit. We were kind of, we took the launch to say, you know what, we need to let people know what we're doing. We've had a lot of conversations with customers and who have had pain points where we were like, these are things that we solve. And they were always like, well, we wish we had known about you sooner, or we wish we had seen this before we XYZ'd. And so we were like, at this point, we need to make that gamut jump, right? So we go from the A to the Z pretty quickly. I mean, for pretty quickly, 15 years. And,
right.
And it was one of those, we wanted to be in control of the growth. We've seen a lot of customers and a lot of our competitors who did it the wrong way or went the investor route and grew too quickly and couldn't manage it. And it just pisses off the customer. So that was never our intention. And so when we decided to do MJ BizCon, we said, this is going to be a game changer, we think. And we were right. When the people started showing up at the booth within the first 30 minutes of us, we were wall to wall people. We were doing group demos of our system. I don't think in the first hour we spoke to anybody in the United States. We had people from Colombia, New Zealand, Australia, Puerto Rico, Canada, Mexico. So there was a lot of out of country businesses that were there, which were huge because it was, these are the things that we're moving towards in our country, and we want to be prepared with the best of. And, and at that point, you are looking at every single person in the space and the competitors that kind of fulfill that space with them. So being able to line up everybody, sometimes we're everybody's cup of tea, sometimes we're not. And that's okay, because there's enough business in this industry to go around.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you talk about like the international space, right? And like
Oh, yeah.
outside of the US, especially, which is our markets that you can easily plug and play into, right? Because of, you being software first and it's, which is highly needed within this burgeoning industry globally. Let's
Exactly.
take, yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say you're absolutely right. I mean, this isn't just about cannabis. This is about technology in cannabis. And where we come from in our foundation is we started in technology in 1997. So, one of the things I always tell people, we not only do we sell the software to other companies from the cannabis and the high risk areas, alcohol, tobacco, CBD, hemp. We're also doing this from a business perspective. We use Proteus to run our own business. So we have 3 businesses we run. We trust our technology so much that we utilize it to run our own businesses. And I don't know anybody that can say that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's amazing. You said 1996 is when the company first started.
January 1997.
Oh, 1997. Yeah. And so, I mean, and then just the pivot that y'all made. I mean, you said 15 years. I think that puts you back to what? My math is terrible. Is that 2008 when you started, or? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I mean, tell me a little bit about that journey and your entrance into cannabis and what that all looked like.
So we had come into the marketplace in 2000 with Proteus as a ERP solution, which it didn't really have that name yet because we just didn't know really what it was. We just knew that we were going to be just doing business online.
What does it mean? What does it mean anyway?
Enterprise resource planning. So it just basically means that
no. Oh, I meant Proteus. Sorry, I thought you were talking about Proteus. Yeah.
So Proteus is actually my little love child. I am a huge proponent of psychological names. And so it's a Greek god. Actually, it's the son of Poseidon. So Proteus was a shapeshifter. And the idea behind our system is that instead of being a pre-built application or system that you had to put your business into, kind of that round peg in a square hole type of situation, we wanted to come in and wrap our business around you, which is kind of where the ERP model coined itself from, or nice. Cloud-based. So that's where Proteus came into play. We said, instead of trying to force people into a solution, allow it to grow with them. They can come in a slower pace. They can learn the ins and outs and then add the different modules and levels to that, kind of like, a connection space, if you will, or a hub.
Yeah. I mean, that's so true, especially when it comes to technology and new apps, right? Because I think you made the point earlier, like it sounds like you didn't take any outside investors, or you still haven't.
We still have not. No, since 97, my husband and I, we always put the customer first. That's our mission and our vision. The customer, and the more that they grow, the more that they grow with us. And so we grow hand in hand. Our goal has always been to be an extension of the customer or the partner's profile, meaning we become a part of their company. So it's a partnership. It's seamless, it's integrated, and it becomes almost like family, the functional family, not the dysfunctional.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and you made that great point. Like, you really need to, like, there's a lot of people that make the mistake, or companies that make the mistake where they take on investments so early, like you said, and they kind of get ahead of themselves, or they don't focus on their core competency within that technology stack or solution. And it kind of, right, it kind of goes off the rails, and then they have to refocus and recenter and kind of start over again in some capacity. And in most cases, and it sounds like the approach that you and your husband are taking is kind of build as it grows, right? Build as there's a need for a new feature or a new functionality, or and that seems to be working. I mean, even outside of cannabis, you look at some of the mid-sized technology players, especially in this economy that we're in right now, and the big tech companies are really, they're hurting right now in terms of layoffs. They're kind of, they've seemed to be overvalued for a long time now.
Mhm.
And the smaller tech companies are kind of, in some cases not taking all the investment and really just kind of scaling and building as they're growing and as they're needing.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
yeah.
Well, think about where we were. Let's look at 1999, where the dot-com boom happened and came into play. You saw a very large piece of what technology was going to be. You saw everybody jump into that pool, you know, basically naked, getting a lot of money, not knowing what to do with the money. And what happens is we had a dot-com failure, which it tanked a lot of stocks, it tanked a lot of, and that was pre-recession. It's good. You want an industry is going to do that. It's going to get up to the top of that hill. It's going to level out for a little bit, and then it's going to plummet, because what does it have to do? Just like it did in the market crash with mortgages, what was it, 10 years ago? Each of those, the technology gamut and that industry as a whole, it overinflated itself to a point where it was volatile, and then it had to level itself out, and it has to crash in order to do that. And that's where I think we see a lot of what's happening now with technology and even these businesses in cannabis. It's still an emerging marketplace. There are still a lot of uncertainties, and we have issues in cannabis, banking. Look at the whole cashless ATM situation that's happening recently. We knew that this was going to start becoming a problem. So what do? Do we go, balls to the wall and just kind of throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks? Or do we do this in a way where we monitor and monetize for everybody as they grow naturally? There's that organic play of business that it has to happen. And there's that balance. And what we're seeing is the shift in balance, right? So that overinflation is starting to crash. You're going to see all those companies that overvaluated themselves, overpromised and underdelivered. They're going to come into this place where they're going to have to let their employees go. And it sucks, because then you hit that recession space, and that recession space then is where we clear out, kind of the clearing in the woods, if you will, where everybody where they're supposed to be is supposed to still be there, stays, and those that can't handle it move on.
Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, especially in 2023, when, you
Gotcha.
know, when this soft landing, as the Fed has been kind of saying, right, is going to really start to take place
Oh yeah.
after the holiday season and consumer spending has gone down. I
And
want to,
those
yeah.
trends now in flower prices are dropping. We have underconsumption and overproduction right now. Where we were and where we put pre-COVID numbers to COVID numbers, and everybody thought that was going to be the be all end all. We were telling our customers, we were saying, guys, don't get comfortable with those COVID numbers. They're not real. They're not true numbers. Be prepared for where you were 2 years prior to COVID. That's going to be your true valuation and where you are in 2023. And we're starting to see those dips in those numbers in that purchasing powers right now. People are back to work. Kids are back to school. Things are sort of getting back to that normal flow of, okay, we're going to get sick. We kind of get it. We know the role now. We stay home, and now we go back to work when we're fine. So we're kind of starting to see that lull of that normalcy kind of come into play. And now what we're looking at, especially on the retail delivery side in cannabis, we're starting to see what true numbers are going to look like for this next year.
It's amazing. I'm thinking as you're talking, like the data that y'all have. I mean, because from seed to sell, truly end to end, Proteus 420. I mean, that's you're starting from the cultivation side, where you can actually monitor water usage, lighting, that can be replicated for other indoor grow facilities. But then also like within the dispensary side, right? And
Yeah.
inventory and SKUs. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that data and some of the trends that you're seeing within that supply chain.
So I think the thing is we have to start from the beginning, right? So we have to start from the foundation. And what we're looking at in cannabis, and I say this all the time, the foundation of cannabis should be no different than the foundation of any other business that deals with inventory, loss prevention, right? So we've kind of made that our foundation. So whether you're a grower or whether you're a retailer or delivery, the inventory and the cash are the two big monikers that are going to play and have a big stasis within the company. So when we hit the foundational part of things, what we're looking at is we're looking at the heavy inventory, we're looking at heavy cash. So we need to monetize those in a way so that we can look at where everything is moving through the system. That became foundational for Proteus. You want to know where your money's coming in, where it's going out, where it's staying when it's not moving, and more importantly, the same thing with your inventory. When it's brought in, who's it coming in from? How much are you receiving? How much are you selling? And then what we are able to do then is get into the business intelligence of things when we start talking about cost versus margin. And people don't even realize that margin just isn't what you pay for the product. It's the sales tax that you have to delineate out of it. It's the coupons and discounts that you're giving to sell the product. And then any other unforeseen issue. If there's, if you're a cultivator and you've got mold, my gosh, like that's a big no-no word, pests and mold. You don't ever want to, say those to a cultivator or a grower. But when you're thinking about something, being able to see the way that those trends happen. Did you bring in something from a particular grower that was outside that may have potentially destroyed or ruined that particular grow? Quarantining things. And that's not even getting into where we get into the producer, processor, manufacturing and extraction side of things, because now you're looking at the cost of the packaging versus the labor that goes into creating that product, the product itself, and converting it from a component to product and inventory. That becomes, when you're looking at assets versus, cogs, it becomes a whole nother game player. And so we've always said that with Proteus, it was very important for it to be, one, tracking the inventory and cash models. Two, making sure that it's easy to understand and that it makes common sense, that anybody, whether they're experienced or lack the experience, can come into the system and feel confident knowing that they'll know how the system will work. And then at the end of the day, being able to take that business intelligence so that you're giving it to the customer, you're basically handing it to them on a silver platter and saying, look at these reports, look at current activity, look at cost of margins, look at loss reports, even customer, demographics, male versus female, age ranges, what are the products they're buying versus what they're not buying. All of that data is valuable information for every single dispensary owner. And I am a big proponent, and I use the proponent word quite a bit when I talk, but I'm a big proponent that the data should always stay with the customer. And that, in my case, my customer, so the delivery, the consultant, those people should be able to take that data and utilize it. And it's up to them to determine whether they want to, give it to a third party, make sure that it if it stays in house or if it goes outside the house. It should be the customer, or in our case, our customer's decision. And so, giving them the tools to make the decisions internally as well as externally, it should all be in their hands.
Yeah. I mean, you're really at the forefront of kind of what we've seen in technology from the tech boom that you were saying, right? As it's evolved, we all clearly know that data is very highly valued, right? I mean, it's the digital gold.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that you can slice and dice data in a way that informs a marketing strategy or a business strategy is always valuable. And so I mean, what are some... Well, first question is, I mean, how do you drill so far into, like, I guess, demographic data, talking about gender, male and female? I mean, is that because licenses have to be given from the customer before they purchase at a dispensary? I mean, all that data is collected that way, correct?
Correct. So what happens is it has to initially start with trust. Does the consumer trust the company that they're giving their information to? Now, I mean, you have medical states and you have adult use states, and you have states that are both. And so, depending on where they fall into that business model, is going to dictate how they're getting that information. Medical patients have to provide their recommendations. They have to have a license on file. And the reason being is you have to validate that physically the person on that license matches the person who's in front of you from a compliance standpoint. And more importantly, being able to then ask the customer and have the customer decide whether or not they want you to market to them. So there's a whole layer there that comes into play. So again, you're allowing the consumer to be a part of the decision with our system. More importantly, you're allowing, when you tell them that they're being able to put that information in the system, being able to complement that trust and say, hey, just know this system it's our data. We're not doing anything with it. All we are doing is communicating with you and being able to give you the ability to either pre-order, contactless order, be able to see our sales, any specials that are coming in, educational type events or classes. So being able to have that communication and have that trust with the consumer, that comes in from the retail and the delivery side. But they have to also know that the system that they're putting their information isn't going out there and isn't going and saying, well, yeah, that data, it's ours now. You put it in our system and now we can do whatever we want. We have a very strict line on our business contract that says that all of the data belongs 100% to the customer. We do nothing with it unless they ask us for information or they ask us for opinions. We'll have transparent conversations. This is what this does. Read your contracts, have your attorneys take a look at this stuff, and being able to see that from a perspective of that one-on-one. So knowing that you can have that trust, I think that's worth its weight in gold, more over than the data. Because once you have the trust of that consumer, guess what? That consumer is going to keep coming back to you and purchasing because they can trust and value you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, trust is a huge one, especially when it comes to online users and giving their data, right? People are very, very skeptical of that, as they should be. I mean, we saw what happened during the 2016 election, right? Where Meta, formerly Facebook, was, selling data to basically both candidates, both parties, to kind of help influence their message and kind of, in certain ways where, I don't, it's really tricky because you can really get deep insights from that data and really either be manipulative or you can, be trustworthy and abide by the consumer's wishes when it comes to their data privacy.
Well, and that's something to think about too when you're talking about something like that in that aspect with Meta. When we're talking about that, you've got a platform that is used from a social component, so all of the ins and outs,
hobbies, interests, relationships. I mean, everything.
All of everything in there. It's free for a reason. It's free because the data that you put in there is what collectively is worth money to that company. That's why we were like, for us, when being in technology as long as we have been, we don't want our information out there. Look, we see what the dark web can do. We saw what it did in cannabis back in 2009 and 2010, respectively. There was people's home addresses and driver's licenses ending up on the dark web because of a hack to a particular software.
Whoa.
And when you're dealing with something like that, when you have that, I tell people security is a big part of everything. Your system is only as secure as your employees' passwords. And that really is what it comes down to. If you've got a customer or you have an employee that is being malicious or and if they want to, there's no way to really stop them from putting that information out there. You just hope that you're doing your due diligence. And that's where SOPs come into play, and really hiring the right team and the right team members that are going to put out the right message for your brand.
I definitely want to dive a bit deeper into some best practices when it comes to cyber hygiene and cybersecurity. But before I do that, I want to touch on one more thing. You talked about how trust is a major challenge, right? And once you can kind of find that trust between that client or that consumer and the system, then all is good. Are there any other challenges that you'd say people or particularly dispensaries or even operators in general find when looking for a technology partner?
So, there's a lot of times where we'll talk to people and they'll come in, they'll be like, what's your software cost? Before they get into anything else, they just want to know what it costs. And their decision base is made on the value of what they think is expensive or not expensive. And I tell people, look, there are situations when I come into play with people like that and I explain to them, I say, look, when you're doing that, we're not going to be your first choice. We're not the most expensive. We're not the least expensive. We kind of fall in the middle. But what you're going to get with the system is going to be, heads above anything else because it's a single source system, meaning you don't have to go out of the gate and add stackable softwares on it, right? So it's not an app. It's not going to stack other apps on top of it where your overhead gets really heavy. You may get in at a price point of, say, something like $400 a month with someone else. But when you start stacking these other softwares in there, you're out at $1,500, $2,000, $2,800. Some,
because
some
they're
of these
not integrated, right? They're not integrated. So you're kind of piecemealing these. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's this game of Russian roulette when you start coming out the gate on that. And so what I tell people, I say, if money is the thing that's going to drive your decisions, then let me show you the system. And when you come back to us, because you will come back to us, then we'll have the real conversation about real business, because we're not making business decisions based on profitability and or growth. We're basing it on, I only want to spend X amount of dollars and that's what I want to spend and no more. So, a lot of times it's an eye opener for them, because they'll go and they'll look at other systems and they'll go, oh, I get what she was saying now on the stacking. Just because someone has 200 integrations doesn't mean that those 200 integrations are applicable to you. More importantly, if you have to put those 200 application integrations into play with the other app, you're looking at something like $2,000 to $3,000 out the gate for one location. That's absolutely ridiculous for cost when you're talking about somebody who has maybe a one point of sale station location or retail shop, because that's where they're starting. And don't even get me started on social equity, because we've got so many companies that are coming in on the social equity part of things, and they're getting these grants and they have these nuances and they do have a play. But what they do is they get signed into these contracts that are not, they're not legitimate. I've seen contracts as long as 5 years, that you're guaranteeing this business is, so now you're just playing the investor monopoly game, right? I've got X amount of investors. I need to make X amount per customer. And the only way to do that is to guarantee that money over a course of a long period of time. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we have a zero contract rule. All of our customers are month to month. We never lock them into contracts.
As it should be. I mean, especially with software. Are you kidding me? Like, I totally get that. I mean, I've been within my own social media agency, right? Like early on when I started, I made the mistake of like signing a contract with a social media management platform, right? Which are super important if you have multiple clients. Like you need that, because you got to be able to post and report and listen and do all the community management all within one roof. But when you're locked into a contract, or, the business model changes, or you lose a client, or, whatever it is, it's like you're stuck and you're paying that amount. So I love that you guys take that month to month approach. And it's so sad to hear that, social equity run businesses are somewhat being targeted in that way. Like, 5 years, you're locked in. And so, I mean, those listening, if you're in that space, just be wary of that type of stuff,
Hey, at the end of the day, I always tell people, before you even talk to technology companies, have a great attorney behind you, someone who has your back. It shouldn't be family. It shouldn't be a friend. Make sure that you have an attorney who is business savvy, can read the contracts, can avoid the pitfalls. Because look, even after 15 years in cannabis and 25 years in technology, we've made mistakes too. I mean, we've done that where we were in a rush to get something situated. We signed a contract and then we noticed that, oh, whoa, this isn't fair. This is definitely not a fair contract. And when you go to bring that into play, the way it's received is, oh, you're in it, you're not getting out. And so you have to start doing finagling, and you wind up spending more for the mistake. And so if I could give anybody any advice out at the gate, is always have a great, powerful attorney who has your back, and have really amazing SOPs for your business. Then the technology comes into play.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go back to the cybersecurity, the cyber hygiene discussion. So, you mentioned passwords. What are some other things that these operators can do from a technology standpoint to ensure that their business is secure and safe, especially if they're, collecting a lot of consumer data?
I'm going to tell you, one of the things I see the most, especially in the smaller retail spaces, is that they don't have an IT company. They have a friend of a friend who's helping them out, and they're not necessarily putting everything in place, the best practices, if you will, for technology. So when that comes into play, the things that you need to think about is firewalls, making sure that you're IP restricting your employees. None of your employees should ever really be needing to work outside of the physical location. If they're a sales consultant or a floor sales consultant, formerly known as a bud tender, or what I like to call the pharmacists of cannabis. And, when you get into that, that's just like the first thing. So password protection, encryption, firewalls, IP restrictions. One of the other things that I see a lot is when it's slow in a retail, they're allowed to surf the web. Guess what? Antivirus software needs to be in play on all of your hardware. And so you get into this game of a good IT company or a good IT person is going to have a checklist. They're going to know that you're dealing with a cloud-based system. They're going to know that there's going to need to be these restrictions, and put the best hardware in place for you with the security protocols in place. And even then, sometimes things happen. Sometimes it's a router breaks, or, hardware is hardware. It's not going to last forever. And sometimes hardware fails. How will you deal with that from an operations perspective if that hardware does fail? Going back and being able to have backups of that data and that information. So that's where we, from the technology side and the business side, partner up with those IT consultants, and we say, okay, here's what we need you to put in place for that customer. But 9 times out of 10, especially in these smaller shops, I see that as not being the priority. Again, they're just starting out, and they're not really going in with a whole lot of money, because they put the money into the build out, the licensing, the things in order to be able to procure and or sell the cannabis, make the cannabis, grow the cannabis. You get into cultivations, you're talking easily $2 million just out the gate, just from right. Just for the onset. That's not even before buying your plants. So, and if you're in a state like, New Jersey, where environmental reports have to be done before you put a grow into place, because it has to have watershed agreements. Northern California is another. Northern California and New Jersey have 2 of the largest environmental impact permit regulations that I've seen, especially where it comes from the watershed reports. In New Jersey, it can take up to 4 years just to get your permit, and that's not even guaranteed. And Northern California, since they started breaking down the larger legacy farmers up there, we've seen a lot of issues where they're making the money on the watershed environmental impact reports, and they're cutting generational families and cultivators, their land mass by half, because they're making it impossible for them to approve the license. And again, now we're got into a different area, but when you get back to those technologies, growers don't necessarily want to have an iPad strapped, or any type of technology strapped to them when they're dealing with the grow. They want to put their hands in the soil. They want to talk to the plants. They want to look at the management of the cultivation itself. They want to talk to the flowers. My dad was a grower. I get it. He used to go and talk to his plants every day, and he would even sing to them. His favorite plants liked Creedence Clearwater Revival.
CCR, I love it. Nice.
He would CCR to, and he would get some big fatties on those. But it's so funny when you think about it. Now you have to realize that your cultivators are going to want to grow, and you're going to have to now add administrative back office staff in order for the grow to be able to be managed from a technology standpoint. So you've got a lot of things that come into play. But I think when we're talking about the security aspect of, nothing is not hackable. Nothing is 100% guaranteed or secure. And I wish I could say that was true. You can do your due diligence, you can do your best, and you can do things out there to mitigate what the damages would be if it did happen, preparation. But at the end of the day, it's really just starting with a really good, clear understanding that technology is going to have a lot of flaws in it, and being able to communicate your needs and your wants so that the person on the receiving end understands it and can take care of it is going to change the game for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that for now, and then eventually with AI and the evolution of AI, we're just going to train these machines to be smarter and adhere to what we're wanting, right?
Exactly. Well, it's so funny you say that because we've been building AI into our platform for a while, and not in the the ideology of robots are going to run everything and kill you in your sleep. That's a Will Smith movie. We're not going to talk. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is being able to make recommendations off of your business intelligence, so that artificial intelligence isn't actually really so much artificial because you're putting in data into the system, and now it's starting to learn from that data, and it's being able to say, hey, I noticed that you're selling this product to 50% female and you don't have a very large male demographic for this product, but a gentleman just bought this product. Maybe you want to recommend this to other males who are in the same category. Or if they purchased indica pre-rolls and there's a sleepy time indica pre-roll that is helping people they're getting a better sleep or a night rest, or better couch heavy, whatever they want to get out of that, whether it's a sativa or indica, being able to get in there and say, okay, these are where my analysis has come. This is what the system's showing that has been sold and who it's been sold to. Maybe you can make these recommendations to this particular person. So when a bud tender, or a sales associate comes into play, and you've got someone who's in front of them and they have, maybe they have a gluten allergy or a nut allergy, and you have that noted in there, and the product that they just purchased has gluten and nuts, being able to say, hey, I just, that AI comes in and says, hey, there's a trigger warning on here. This person has a gluten allergy and a nut allergy, and this product may contain nuts. Check it and notify the consumer and make sure that they're okay with it. So being able to have those things, it's going to now start facilitating smarter conversations, better education, and better interaction with the consumers from the retail side as well.
Yeah, the last part you said, the better interaction. I mean, that's, and the other examples really removes, I mean, like the marketing consultant, right? Or like the business consultant. I mean, not replaces, but I mean, those roles are really kind of geared for the individual on the outside to see what's missing, and then kind of say, hey, maybe we should think about doing this, or maybe this isn't working, right? Let's try that. Like the example you gave about the one male purchasing, maybe you should recommend to other males who fit that particular persona, right? So that's amazing how data can inform AI or machine learning to be trained to eventually spout out those types of recommendations.
Oh, 100%. Well, about a year ago, what we did on our purchase order side. So depending on the state they're in, most of our metric states, what we did was we as they were bringing in the data from, let's say our retailers, they were bringing in, we have purchase order or incoming transfers. So when the incoming transfer was coming in, it would create a PO in the system. If you didn't have that product in the system, once you put it in there, then it always remembered to be able to go back and put that product into that same thing. Also make a recommendation like, oh, you bought this from this vendor last time. Is it still the same vendor or did it change? So being able to notify, having the system notify the person or the administrator who's doing the back end, just to quantify the information that they're putting in and just say, oh no, that's correct. Once it does that, and it's done it a couple of times, it gets used to it. And that's where that learning kind of comes in. And that's where the artificial part of the intelligence comes in. Look, I think AI, it's kind of like cryptocurrency to me. It can be really good if in the right hands, but it's also could be very volatile if not done correctly.
Totally. Yeah.
Create a situation where you may not necessarily want to be in. So we want to make sure that it's smarter data that it's taking, and that the recommendations are still allowing that human interaction and that decision to say yes or no. We don't want the system to just start making decisions for you, because now that hands-off approach, that's where mistakes can be made, right? So there still needs to be a level of interaction between the customer and the product to the consumer. And again, that trust comes into play, knowing what you're doing, knowing what you're selling. I have customers who will tell me a lot of times, they'll be like, well, what do you think about this? I'm like, hey, your product's better than I do. Why would you think why do you think adding that will add this level of, marketing or brand awareness for you? And then, oh, well, maybe, because my thing is at the end of the day, what's the purpose? What is your purpose of this? If you have a purpose, then you can you can explain the purpose, and then you can educate on the purpose, and then it has an end result. And I think that AI will come to a certain point, and it will only take you so far. It will never be, Westworld, if you will. I don't think in our lifetime, or even several lifetimes from now, I don't think we'll have a Westworld situation.
I was gonna ask you that, because I agree. I don't think that in our lifetime we'll see that, but I mean, there's been others out there that are close to the AI world, right? I think Elon Musk has even said on a podcast that it's doom and gloom. Maybe Lex Friedman also has. So like, I'm just, you make such a great point in that, like, we have to make sure who is responsible for this technology and who's leading it, or what their intentions are, because it can be, I mean, you talk about AI bias, right? Like whoever's training, or this machine learning, or these software systems of artificial intelligence, there could be inherent bias from that individual, right? So
Exactly.
if we think outside of the cannabis industry, say there's an AI system that helps with college tuition or college scholarships or what have you, right? There could be individuals that maybe are left out, or not as
It can bend to
yeah,
the
it
will
could,
of the
right.
person is putting that information in. I have a great example. I always tell people this story when I talk about specifically like marketing websites and things like that. And, I get people to go, "Oh, I'm a web designer. I build WordPress sites." And I'm like, "Okay, you realize WordPress is just a blog, right?"
It's a template. You're
Just a
not
blog.
designing, you're designing the template that you can put together, which, hey, I give it up to those people, because one, I've tried it. I'm on the digital marketing side, and that tool WordPress is very complex in itself, because there's so much you could do with it, right? But I
Exactly.
agree with you in the sense
But those
that they're not
plugins,
writing code. Is that what you
right?
mean? Yeah.
Exactly. So, but when you think about it I'm thinking of it from the good cop, bad cop situation. Every WordPress site requires a delineation of plugins in order for it to do
Right.
X, Y. You've got, and it's open source. You've got 8 billion people in the world, and let's say 6 billion of them are writing plugins for, WordPress. Think about the average person. How many of you and them do you think are actually on the up and up? It's that prince in Nigeria who wants to send you that cashier's check for $25. You've got a lot of countries that are out there that are looking for the scam or the deal. And I hate to say other
That's like
countries.
the apps too, though, right? Wouldn't you say
Yeah,
that's like the App Store? Yeah.
yes, you're putting in your credit card trust. You're putting in your credit card information. Do you really know where it comes from? The other relative side is it's like the Instagram ad. How often do you see that cute shirt or that little? My biggest thing is, okay, I love Scottish coos. They're cows, but in Scotland they call them coos. And I want to retire and I want to raise coos. I want to just boop their noses, and I want to have a field of coos in a 20-acre, on
Would
the.
you eat them, or would you just be a
No,
pet?
no, no, no. I want to love them, and they're all going to have names. And
Okay, so
you
they'll
don't
just
eat the.
something that, like, they'll graze and they just live. I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
out. I get to boop their nose. I get to pet them. But so funny because I talk about that, and I always joke around. I said that's my end goal, but in order to get there, I have to be able to do certain things. So when we get into the trust game, and when we get into like the Instagram game of, hey, there's a coup, you want to go take a photo with it, and you book out a time and you put your credit card in there, you don't really know where that information goes. And a lot of times, that cute shirt that you ordered, comes in from Wish, and it's this big, and it's really for a Barbie, not for a human. And so it's that coup thing. I can order a coup through Instagram for my farm in Scotland, and it's probably going to be a little tiny motorized coup that just walks across my desk, which I would
Right.
totally be anyway. But
why is it? I wonder why it's coos. Is it spelled COO, or how do they spell it?
they're
Cow?
spelled cow. It's just the brogue when they talk.
Oh, it's the accent. The
Yeah.
I
And
see.
every time I'm in Scotland, I'm like, please tell me the word cow. And they're like, coal or coo.
And you're like,
The coos
yes.
in the field. The coos are in the field. And I always joke around, and I'm like, I just want all the coos.
I love it. Well, hey, I have no doubt that one day you're gonna reach that goal for sure.
I hope so.
I'm gonna be following you on Instagram with your coos grazing throughout the pasture in Scotland. It's gonna be beautiful.
That'll be my new handle, Dawne and her coos.
There you go. Dawne, I'm curious. I want to ask, obviously a lot about the tech side of things, right? You're very tech savvy. You're CMO of
Yes.
Proteus. So what are you doing on the marketing side, and what's your passion on that area?
So, if you knew the lives I've lived in this body, my background, actually, believe it or not, I was a nurse in a whole nother life
What?
ago. Uh-huh. And that was a very long time ago. I'm really old.
You're older. You're not
I'm
old.
old. I'm older and wiser. That's
There
my
you go.
granddaughter told me that you're the wisest person I know. I'm like, yes, I am. But it is it. I came from I always have been a woman in a man's world, right? So I went in as a nurse. I exited the nursing and went into biotech because of my love for the science and genetics. And on the East Coast, that was a really big thing. We had Johnson and Johnson, we had Marlboro, we had all of all the big biotechs that were in that East Coast, that Northern Jersey sector of the space.
Right.
They've been trying for years to synthesize this plant. I'm going to say at least 25, 30 years. They've been trying to synthesize this plant. And, when I moved out to California, I didn't bring that license with my nursing license. I just said, all right, I'm going to try to take this chance in the biotech sector. And when I moved out here to the West Coast from the East Coast, I wind up meeting David. I want to say probably 6 months after I moved here, and he was instantaneously my best friend, and he was doing things that I couldn't even fathom in my brain. I was like, wait a second, that just doesn't make sense. And why would you do this? And I became a sponge. I just sat and I listened and I learned. And it was about a year or two later, we wind up becoming girlfriend and boyfriend. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? With your talent and my ability to talk to anybody and everybody about anything, we could do things. I said, we should give this a go. Wow. And I learned everything I could about marketing and business, and watching all of the men in the industry in biotech, the decisions that they made and how they made the decisions. I learned from the mistakes. I made my own mistakes. I wasn't afraid to tell people very honestly. I'm a pretty blunt person. I have no filter from my brain to my mouth, which can be a very detrimental thing sometimes. But I would walk into a room and I would say, look, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. It may not be what you want to hear, but you need to hear this because these are the decisions you need to make. And I just learned over years and through different mistakes, and watching my husband kind of go through starting a hosting company, doing the marketing, doing websites, building programs. It was learning and growing with him. And so when that was done, I had all of this this knowledge in my head, and it was just like drawers. I always tell people, if you could see inside my head, it's like a giant library of all these drawers. A lot of them have useless information, but a lot have really good information. I could tell you some really great useless facts, which makes me great in Trivial Pursuit. But from a business perspective, what I had was the knowledge of coming from startup businesses, working with hospitals, large corporations, watching large investor SEC type of, Security and Exchange Commission type companies, public companies, non-public companies, learning the ins and outs of that and knowing all of the business things that came into play. One of the things that I always knew was the biggest problem was the breakdown of communication between the upper management and the worker bee, right?
100%. Yes. Yeah.
Always the problem has always been. And when we started our business, David and I both agreed, we always wanted to make sure that the companies that we worked with understood that we were there to become an extension of them, to help them make better business decisions. And I then monitored the phrase that I was a passion pusher, right? So for me, it was, what's your passion? My passion is to get you to grow. And that became something that just kind of constantly, grew from there. And so whenever you see my signature on my thing, it says Dawne Morris, CMO, co-founder, passion pusher. And, I think it's important because without the passion, it's, what do you have? It's just that dull. I'm going to make a movie reference of Joe versus the volcano. And, if you ever seen that, it's like that that, that dumb, it's all gray and everybody's, moseying in. You're just going in to do your job, to come home, to get a paycheck, to spend it, to do back the rinse and repeat. And I think when you have a passion for something, and you can fulfill the passion for other people, you get equally as passionate about it. And so I became passionate about David and his visions and where he was seeing things. And then it became a natural progression for me to be passionate about other people's businesses through that gamut. And now here we are in the cannabis space, which was something I grew up with my father. And when he passed away, before he passed away, he said to me, the student has become the teacher. And there were things I was teaching him about the plant that even he didn't know. And so for him to have that, for him to say that to me, it gave me kind of this, wow, I learned from the passion that he had for plant medicine. And then I was able to take that and educate people in the business realm from the business technology that I've learned. And then from the marketing side of it, knowing the ins and outs just of what I've taught myself over many years, I brought a different perspective, a fresher perspective to a lot of businesses. And that's kind of really what kind of differentiated us from the beginning, and what I still feel really differentiates us now in where we are with cannabis.
Yeah. It's a beautiful journey, Dawne. I mean, and what I really love about it is I try to practice the same thing in terms of whatever path you're currently on, even if it doesn't work out, or you may pivot later on and enter a new industry or a new job title, new role. It's what you learn. It's what you take away from those experiences, right? Because that's ultimately, in my view, how a human really can grow, like human growth, right? Individual growth, one who learns from mistakes, or learns from successes, or learns from others' mistakes or successes.
Oh, 100%. If you attach the day where I'm going to learn something new every day, which is what my goal is, if I learn something new every day, that makes me so happy. And sometimes it's a good thing that I learn, sometimes it's a bad thing that I learn, but that's okay, because I'm still learning. One of my favorite poems is by Robert Frost, and it's called The Road Less Traveled. And I always tell people every day, I chose, and I always will choose, that road less traveled. It's not going to be the easiest road, and it's going to have a lot of bumps and bruises. But at the end of that road, that journey that I took is going to make me feel the most fulfilled and the most happy, because I'm going to know where I started and where I'm going to end.
Yeah, I mean, humans don't want to be stagnant. We want to keep pushing. I mean, it's in our nature, right? We build things, we innovate, right? There's new technologies that are emerging, there's new solutions. We're always figuring things out, especially within the cannabis space. I've said it before. I mean, the most ingenious people are in this space, and really, really talented, smart people like yourself, Dawne. And I've really enjoyed talking with you this evening. It's been great. I'm sure that you probably need to get back to work, because the work
Yeah,
never
everybody's
stops.
clocked back in. We're good. You want to talk for another 2 hours? I got you.
I wish I could. My wife is hungry, waiting for me for dinner. So I would go another hour, but I gotta feed this pregnant, beautiful wife of mine.
When is she? When due?
March 9th is our due date.
Oh, good. She's already pressing to get this baby out of me phase then, correct?
She's in the third trimester. That's exactly it. Yep.
Yeah, that first quarter, this last quarter is going to be the long haul. I just had another grandbaby. My daughter-in-law just had, well, she's my ex-daughter-in-law, but she just had another baby with her new husband, and they're all my family. So we just, 10 pound, 9 ounces. I said, that's not a baby. You gave birth to a human, like a live, like but she's a little potato, and I love it. So good luck to you guys, and I really wish you the best of luck with everything in the next quarter.
Thank you so much, Dawne. I can't wait to just follow your progress, and Proteus 420 just continuing to be a leader in the ESRP space. Am I saying that right?
ERP.
ERP, excuse me.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, no, you're good.
And this was a really, really interesting conversation. I really appreciate it. Let's have you back on really soon. Okay.
Would love to be able to have this conversation again. I love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. And thank you all for listening.
Have
Bye.
a good one.